Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. This is our flagship show, and it's dedicated to presenting to you the many different approaches to astrology and the many different types of astrologers. I remember when I first started learning about astrology, I was astounded at all the different ways that astrology can help us with our lives. There's astrologers that focus on the financial aspect of life, or the deep soul evolution aspect of life. There are astrologers who can take a question that you have and then cast a chart based on that question and then give you very specific answers. And it goes on and on and on. There's so many different ways to practice astrology. There's so many different ways that astrology can help us. So this show is dedicated to introducing you to lots of those different perspectives. And today I am so thrilled to be back with Frank Clifford, who is a regular here at the Astrology Hub podcast. And he has our weekly show, Frank Answers, which, Frank, I just got done listening to the most recent one about our sign compatibility, which I think we're going to be able to go into a little bit here today. But we're here again with Frank to clear the record, so to speak. There are so many misconceptions about the different placements being good or bad, and different, sign compatibilities being good or bad, and different things that you might see in your chart, or someone might see in your chart and go, "Ooh, that's scary," or "That's wrong." And so we're here to really clear the record. And Frank is so good at doing this, at helping us understand and reframe. It's like, well, that could be bad, but it also could be this. Here's another way to look at it, a much more empowering way to really work with your chart. So, Frank, I'm so happy to have you back on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Amanda. Great to be here.
Yeah. So let's start out with, and also I wanted to let you know, if you do have any questions while we're live here today, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If you watch the recording of this and you have questions later, you can put them in the chat as well. And we'll do our best to get your questions answered. Frank loves to answer questions. That's why we created the show, Frank Answers. All right. So let's start with reframing sign interactions and compatibilities. So what are sign interactions, and what do you mean by compatibilities, and what do we need to reframe about these things?
Right. Well, that's the first. Oh, I can hear. I'll just turn myself down a little bit. What we can do with signs in terms of synastry or in our own charts depends very much how we see certain signs as compatible elements. So you might read initially when you're studying astrology that certain signs don't get on. So Scorpio might not get on with Gemini. Taurus doesn't get on with Aquarius, and you have different opinions of this. And you may be somebody with that mix in your own chart, with the sun, moon, or ascendant in so-called difficult or antagonistic combinations. And so you might be living with it, or literally living with somebody or working with somebody who has signs, planets in signs that are allegedly have difficulty. And so what we're going to be doing in the first week is really addressing how to spot similarities and differences between the signs, pinpointing the heart of any combination, whether that's something you have in your chart and you think, how does my sun work with my midheaven, or how does my moon work with my ascendant when they're in such different signs? How do I get that to work? So we'll be looking at ways to make these work, ways to see how together they can move forward in a productive way. And we can also look at synastry, relationship compatibility, and how signs can get on regardless of which sign they are and how much certain books say they're not compatible.
So Frank's referring to our upcoming series of workshops that we'll be doing together. It's a continuation of our Empowering Astrology workshop series. So that's coming up here in just a few weeks. And we do have the waitlist open if you're interested in joining. That's astrologyhub.com/empowering astrology. But we'll get a little bit more into it. So Frank, where do you think these misconceptions come from? Like, why do we have so many misconceptions about compatibility?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think it comes from people's experiences. So they might date somebody and say, I'll never date a Cancer man again, or I need to go into special therapy because I dated a Virgo moon, whatever it may be. I think some of those are based on those experiences. Astrologers also base them on simple geometry. Signs that are square to each other, 3 signs apart, so like Taurus and Aquarius, or Taurus and Leo, are said to be at right angles, and the square aspect astrologically has a connotation that is challenging and difficult. But challenging doesn't mean negative. It doesn't mean bad. And when we have squares, and that's another week I'll be doing when we look at aspects in week 3. Squares, for instance, bring in challenges in our lives so we can master things. And certain people in our lives, we think, that was like an intense situation that I really understood myself better. I learned to be a better partner, a better employee, and a better employer. So the square aspects between signs, like the fixed signs, are square to each other or opposite each other. Same with the mutable, same with the cardinal. When you come across so-called challenging aspects, these are signs that are going to initiate growth if you let them. Or you can simply say, no more Taurus, no more Cancer, no more Aries. And then you lose the opportunity to really develop that aspect of who you are, because each sign is teaching you something about who we all are as people. And secondly, you lose the opportunity to have meaningful relationships with people where it's not simply nice and easy, but it's about growth. And what's fascinating is that compatibility in terms of signs, and we're looking at this in week 1, we tend to be more compatible by element with our friends. So if you're a fire sign, or sun in fire signs, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, or maybe the moon there, your friends tend to have a lot of fire often. But it's the relationships we have with people in terms of deeper relationships, long-term commitments, where the signs are often at odds with what we're used to. So our friends will represent the so-called textbook easy solutions. Aries likes Leo, and Leo likes Aries, and Sagittarius, the fire signs, get on. Our friends tend to represent that. But the people that really change our lives through meaningful relationships, be them short or long-term, are the ones that are going to challenge our notion of being simply comfortable and having fun.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. I mean, I think that most people would probably agree that the closest intimate relationships can be the most challenging, but you're actually saying that that's by design in a lot of ways. Like, we actually attract the more intimate the relationship is, the more challenging, but the more opportunity to really elicit growth from us. And the other thing that I'm hearing you say is that it's really about a mindset and or perspective of what the point of being alive is. So if you have a perspective that one of the main objectives, I guess, so to speak, to actually being alive is to grow, to know thyself, to evolve as a human being, as a soul, then you will shy away less from these challenging combinations, because you may actually invite them in, because like, well, that's going to actually help me even more become who I really am, because they're reflecting something to me that I really need to see, that my friends might not reflect to me because we're so similar. Like we get along and we're very similar, but this person's like, ooh, this person really like pulls this out of me.
That's right. It's the people that we meet that really change our lives are very often the ones that challenge us to come out of our comfort zone. And astrologically, you can see that very clearly. The recent Frank Answers that you were referring to is all about looking at people who have sun, moon, ascendant 5 signs away from your sun, moon, and ascendant. And sometimes you might have them and they contradict each other a little bit, or you may have your sun and moon already 5 signs apart, but you will be attracted to signs that are very different by element and by mode. And again, that's by design, because if we were all here to just sit comfortably, there'd be no growth, no development, no learning, no empowering, no reframing. So it's an opportunity, every relationship, whether it quote unquote fails or not. We
Right.
often think of relationships, well, that didn't work out, when in fact the moments we spend in there of understanding who we are and who other people are, these are never wasted, I don't think.
Frank, do you also see this in family relationships? I mean, I think a lot of people would say that the family relationships are also especially challenging. Do you see these kinds of combinations in family dynamics as well?
Yes, you tend to see that. Looking at a whole chart, of course, not just simply sun signs, but starting off with the sun, moon, and ascendant, you see that a lot. And you also see what might be considered the quote unquote scapegoat of the family, or the person that carries a lot of the unexpressed elemental or modal information. So you might find that 3 members of the family are very watery, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, and the 4th member of the family has a focus on air. Or you might find that all 3 members are Sun, Saturn. There's a aspect between Sun and Saturn in the chart, and the 4th member might be Sun, Jupiter, or Sun, Uranus. And this is where the rest of the family can grow from that person, but often that person is the one that is trouble, quote unquote, difficult, or the one that seems to unsettle the dynamics of the family. And of course, you could say that person signed up to do that difficult role. And I think in any family, we can see there's one person who is a bit like the child saying, the emperor's got no clothes on. The one that says, why can't everybody else see what I see?
Mm-hmm.
And I need to speak up about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that person in the family is sometimes scapegoated, they're sometimes pushed out, or just not understood. So we can see those dynamics in the family too. And I'm sure a lot of people listening recognize that simply by following an area like astrology and embracing that makes us the lone sheep in the family, the one that's separated, because we're starting to see the world differently. Some people come from an astrology family, which is amazing. I've had clients all week who've got parents who've been in astrologers or into astrology for years, but often just simply wanting to see the world differently, wanting to discover yourself, can mean that we're the odd one out, we're the different one in the family.
It's one of the things I love about astrology too, that the deeper you go, the more you see that the different ways of viewing the world and the different perspectives are also like in the chart. So when you get those people in your life that are like, I just don't understand that person. I just don't see why they could see it this way or why they're doing it this way. It's like, well, no, you don't. And that's okay. Like, that's actually by design. You're not going to agree with everybody and everybody sees it exactly the same way, but that's the beauty of it. Like, that's the beauty of really being in a place where it's like, I want to understand you. Like, I'd love to understand you versus like, you're wrong. That's wrong. That's bad. And I also wanted to acknowledge Stephen the Jupiterian, who asked a very great question early on. And Stephen, we'll get to your question at the end, which is, I have been studying astrology for 30 years. How do you know you are ready to do it professionally? I feel like this is a great question for you, Frank. So we'll hold that one to the end.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see. I want to ask also about reframing planets in signs. So we hear a lot of the time, oh, that Mars is in Cancer, that's in detriment, or we hear these different combinations, and then what it means. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that. There's lots of debate, as you know.
Yes,
right?
well, it's sprouted up in the last few days because Mars has just moved into Libra, and there've been a lot of comments about Mars being in a detrimented or debilitated position. And as you know, I've say a lot about this. Whenever I speak to you, Amanda, whenever I speak to anybody, I try to undo some of those negative associations, because you just have to look at charts of people who achieve something, and you think, oh, they're working with a so-called debilitated planet, according to the ancients. And the key to me always is to remember that when the ancient astrologers And I think they were almost all men as well. So that's what another thing. And they were usually working for people in power, and they had to be extremely careful what they said and what they did. Otherwise, it might be their head. What they were doing often is electional astrology. They were electing the best time for the king to launch the ships, or begin a war, or to have to be crowned, to be, the coronation. Or they were answering questions. They were doing horror. With those two, you're dealing with a level of, they can be complex, but the level of understanding has to be quite simple. Is this a powerful position? Is this true to the planet's nature? Is it going to do the job? So that's really what they were working with. But when it comes to human beings, particularly in the 21st century, with options and ideas and self-awareness and everything from psychology to philosophy to the spiritual growth that has permeated so many Western countries in the past 50, 60 years in particular, you're dealing with a whole spectrum, a range of expression. So somebody can come in and be a very prolific, outstanding sports person with a Mars that traditionally would be considered debilitated, in a negative house, etc. And the idea of weakness and strength comes from identifying your chart. It doesn't come from a simple association that was determined by an astrologer hundreds of years ago. So your understanding of who you are, how you can best express that placement, that's strength. The weakness is just saying, poor me, I'll never be happy, I'll never have any money because I've got X, Y, and Z according to this book or according to this astrologer, and they've given me an example, and that's why I've never had any money or whatever. And it just repeats some of the things, some of the scripts that we need to tear up. And so what I try and do, and what Astrology Hub works at doing very often, is to get people to be thinking about how best to use all of their placements in a way that suits them, in a way that works well for them, in their position, in their time of life. And your Mars may work very well for you on the track and field when you're a teenager, you're 20-something, and it might be a very different type of expression when you're in your 50s and 60s. It might take a more political stance, for instance. So we're constantly growing and developing. The weakness, the strength, the debility, all of that, I think, is a state of mind of how we deal with our placements rather than what somebody defines them as. And I think that's really what I want to get across in this series, and work with everybody to look at their charts, look at these, and to be able to find the nugget of gold in those placements instead of just give up on them. Oh, well, that's the difficult part of my chart. Oh, I'll try and cover that up. That doesn't work. You end up exploring and expressing your chart every day of your life, and ignoring one bit or being ashamed of it, putting it in a cupboard somewhere, hoping it won't wake up. These are all, I guess, negative ways of expressing what is a birth chart. I remember somebody saying years ago, whether you believe in God, you believe in nature, you believe in some cosmos, the cosmos, God, nature, it doesn't make junk. There's no bad horoscope. We don't have junk. Everything is of the same magic dust, dirt. A Virgo might call it dirt. Magic dust. We're all part of the same substance. And the idea that a chart could be negative or bad or junk, well, that just doesn't exist, in my view.
Wow. I love that so much, Frank. And I love what you said about, the real strength. The strength isn't necessarily having a strong placement. The real strength is in actually taking whatever you have in your chart and actually like expressing it the best way that you can. And that is strength. So the other thing I was just thinking, I have a really close friend who is trying to cultivate more of the yin aspects of herself, more of the feminine, more of the like receiving, like magnetic aspects. And she has a chart that, I think there's only one placement in her chart that would be considered feminine. It would be considered yin. And so she's trying to, like, how does she find the balance with all that yang energy? How does she actually find the balance with yin? And I was thinking, it's just something that you will have to be more like you'll have to actually learn and cultivate very mindfully. But the thing that I've experienced when people do that is that they own it really deeply, and they're actually able to teach it because they had to learn it. Whereas someone that comes in naturally wired that way, they don't really know why they're that way or how they got that way. So it's harder for them to actually teach other people how to embody those things. So I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's a bit like the Saturn placement in the chart. Wherever that is, by sign or by house, by aspect, it's given a bad rap when we read about it often. And yet, when you look at the great successes that people have accomplished, despite the odds or in spite of difficulties, it's because they've attended to the so-called challenging or quote unquote weak part of the chart, which can be Saturn, that bit that we fear, the bit that holds us back, that we're afraid of. And you face that and it becomes a great strength of yours. So Saturn is a great example of how, look at anybody's chart and they mastered a part of their chart, it will usually be described by their Saturn placement. If we just sit back and think, oh, I've got Saturn in the second house, somebody said I'll never make any money. Well, I'll show you 10 people that I work with or on Astro Data Bank, we can look them up, who've got a lot of money with Saturn in the second and are using that very well, have mastered it. If it's money that you want, of course. So people have a lot of scripts written and then they look at their chart and they might read 10 wonderful things. And then one thing that they really fear is what they remember.
Oh,
It's
yes.
like reading Frank Answers on YouTube, and I'm looking down and thinking, oh, that's nice, that's a lovely comment, and then somebody says something and you think, oh god, I'm going to remember that because it's a little bit negative or angry
Yes.
or something. So this is the thing about Saturn in particular, but the whole chart, how we look at it, how we view it as a simple fact about ourselves, or ideally as an opportunity for, okay, that's part of who I am, that's a range of possibility, I'm going to explore that. This is where we can go and we can really explore and feel empowered. And your friend that was talking about the yin or yang energy, she may have 9 or whatever, 8 planets or 9 planets in so-called masculine signs, which are the fire and the air signs. But some of those planets are naturally feminine energies, like the moon, like Venus, like Neptune, even Pluto are considered so-called feminine energies. And we know nowadays everything is being merged. People are from the choice of their sexuality to their identity, all of these things are being merged, and astrology is going to have to reflect that, or at least speak to that in many ways. But yes, the planets themselves have a so-called masculine or feminine type of energy. Anyway, so it may be that she needs to or wants to work with those planets, even if they're in so-called masculine signs.
Yeah, interesting. And then she can potentially help in that reframing process of what it even means to be feminine, for example.
Yeah.
What it even means to be masculine. What does that even mean? And what are the many different ways that can be expressed?
The new generation is teaching us so much about moving away from that one or the other, that sense that we have in astrology. And in astrology, it's very useful to understand it. But also we know in astrology, we're all a mix of everything. Mm-hmm. And at times we're more Mars, other times we're more Venus, at times we're more Jupiter, other times we're more Saturn. And that's the wonderful, this is why astrology has survived for millennia, is because it's a lens that we can view it from our own perspective. We can take it and say, that's what it means in this society, or how I want to see the world, whether that's financial astrology, as you mentioned earlier, or psychological or evolutionary or traditional. It's a simple map. Our lens and the lens of astrology very much depends on how we decide to view it, how we decide to process that information.
Okay, so I know in the upcoming workshop series, there's going to be 3 workshops as a part of this series. It's a continuation of the the first Empowering Astrology workshop that we did in July. We're going to be also talking about aspects. So can you explain a little bit what you mean by reframing planetary combinations and aspects? What does that mean? Why do you see a need for us to actually do this?
Yes, well, that third week in October, it's going to be focused on so-called difficult planetary combinations. So things that we tend to worry about, oh, I've got Venus, Saturn in my chart, or I've got Moon, Uranus, so-called difficult planetary placements that often when you read them in books, they'll explain sometimes very well, but there'll be a sense of, well, okay, that's what I'm stuck with. And I think what I want to do with all three of the classes is to work with ways forward, solutions to so-called difficult or problematic combinations like Sun Saturn or Moon Saturn or anything Saturn. Saturn gets all the hard rap, and be able to find a way forward of how that can work and show charts of people who have made that work and hear stories as well of people through Astrology Hub who have made that work well or struggling with it, and get inspired by other examples. And of course, not just planetary combinations, but the aspect between them, like the square and the opposition that I mentioned. And again, these are given negative interpretations at times. I remember one of my early astrology books back in the late 80s, when I began, had a very positive paragraph for Sun trine Moon or Sun sextile Moon, and then a negative one for Sun square Moon or Sun opposite Moon. And I found it so bizarre that it was one thing or the other. And it just seemed to be, if planets are square to each other or opposite each other, it's a problem. It's going to bring out the worst. And you just have to see a few people's charts, people who you know, people who have achieved something, people who are happy in life, to know that they're using them in a very different way. And so the challenge that I've set myself for next month and the series is to work positively, to find ways forward, to find options. That's what I think astrology is very good at, is saying, oh, here's a range of options, here's a range of expressions. How would you like to use that? What do you choose every day? Do you choose to use your Mercury-Mars square in a combative way, to argue with people, to be irritable all the time? And if you do, you're going to meet irritability. Everyone's going to be slower than you every day, and you're going to be exhausted from the mental and verbal conflict. Or are you going to use it to pour that energy into writing, into fighting for other people's rights, advocating certain positions? So there are always possibilities, and this is what the series is about: is to get people to rethink, to reframe those in ways that feel right for them at that particular time in their lives,
and giving the opportunity, that the possibility to choose. And that's one of the things I love about what you do, because when we hear a certain story, I mean, I remember looking, my daughter was starting a new school. We looked at her astrology. It looked super intense. Like it was going to be a really hard chapter for her, you know? And then I looked up the transits that were happening in a book, and she's like, Mama, what does it say? You know, read it. She's, you know, she was 11 or 12. And I had to filter. I had to filter what I was reading, because I didn't want her to get stuck in her head that it was going to be a certain way, and that it was scripted and there was no way around it, and she was going to be miserable for the next few months. And it's amazing how powerful those stories are that we tell ourselves. And that when that's the only story we hear, and it's the only story we can see, how much we really do just live into that as if we don't have a choice. But what you're talking about in presenting a range of possibilities and in presenting stories, because what you're saying when you're using people's examples, and you know, here's someone who had that same thing, and this is what they did with it. That's a story. And here's what this person did with it. That's another story. And then we can actually create our own story instead of it being really scripted for us. So it's beautiful. I love the work that you do. I'm so grateful that we get to have your presence here at Astrology Hub, and that you share this wisdom with the people in our community, because I think that if more astrologers have this, and a lot of astrologers do, I'm not trying to say they don't, but you're particularly good at this, that when they are able to present a range of possibilities to their clients and a range of different stories of, it could manifest this way, or look at what this person did with it, that it just, again, opens up the empowerment of choice.
Yes.
Yes, and you get to choose. I want to be miserable. Okay, choose to be miserable. I want to be, I don't want to be miserable. Okay, then do this. This would be another way to do that. Go ahead.
I remember learning from a client years ago who really, she wanted to come just to have her chart done. Yeah, and her mother had died. Her mother had always looked at her chart, and she came to see me a couple of years in a row, and then she stopped seeing me because, this is what I got from her, is that I was enthusiastic and wanted to help her, and she really didn't want to change much. Mm-hmm. And I learned from that the Aries in me wants everyone to achieve some level of excellence that they're happy with, and to live their lives fully, and you learn that other people have different trajectories. They're not as fast. They want to do it in their own way. And I remember her really expressing that to me, and I was so grateful, because part of me felt I'm not doing a good job as an astrologer unless I'm helping her make progress. But she just came to enjoy the process and to enjoy a bit of me time as well. So it's not just choosing to do wrong and choosing to do right. Some people are just, they appreciate the reflection as well, whether it's just reading or listening to Anne or Christopher or any of the people that are on Hub, Astrology Hub, and just listening to that perspective. It just gives you a half an hour with yourself as well. And there's no need to go out and change the world if you don't want to, or change your world. Yeah.
It's such a good point. It's such a good point. Everyone has their own process with this. They're all doing it for their own reasons. And I love that you're reminding us of that too. There's not just one way to live, and this way is a successful life and this way is an unsuccessful life. It's like, no, lots of different experiences that our souls want to have. Really good. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple questions.
Okay.
Let's go back to Stephen the Jupiterian, who's been studying astrology for 30 years and wants to know how he knows if he's ready to become an astrologer.
Well, I would say give it a try. See some clients. Start off by doing charts of friends and family, which you may already do. But don't do it for free. If you're doing that long, charge or have a swap of services. A lot of my students swap. They might swap a Reiki session for an astrology session with somebody else, whatever they feel comfortable with. But if you've been studying that long and you want to see clients, give it a go. But a lot of astrologers don't see clients. They end up writing blogs or creating Instagram messages about astrology. And you don't have to be an astrologer working with people. I had a client last week who actually had put a lot of pressure on herself to do that. And I said, well, why not run a group of people who meet up online or in person and talk about astrology? That might be your astrology. Don't feel like you have to teach it. Give it as a consultation, or to do it quote unquote professionally in that way. So there are other options once again. How do you know? If you want to do it, you'll know because you have a hunger for it. Don't feel like you have to do it. Find another way to express it. If it's not with clients, it could, as I say, would be blogs. It could be with writing online, just posting, doing different things. So, but if I have a hunger to want to express that with people, get going with it, do it, because the more you do, the better you become at articulating the chart, listening, being in dialogue with people. This is all super important with a client. And don't feel you have to do or know everything. That's the key. My goodness, so many people wait for 20, 30 years because they don't understand the 13th harmonic or something. And I think, oh, for heaven's sakes, do what you do best. He will know, he will have a whole lifetime of experience already that will attract clients who need him as an astrologer instead of me, instead of somebody else.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Yes. And I know there's so many people, I've heard this from our community so many times. That what you just reflected, they feel like they need one more class or one more workshop or one more technique before they're actually ready. And for those people, I'm always like, no, just go, like get started, do it. The world needs to, in my humble opinion, really great astrologers out there practicing and helping people. There's a lot of people who really need the guidance, the insights, and you just being there, able to hold that for people and reflect things to them. It can be really simple. We don't have to overcomplicate. So I think that, giving yourself the permission, if you are feeling that hunger and that drive, like Frank is saying, to just start. Go ahead, Frank.
And keep learning. So do come back, learn from people that you like, who inspire you, who get you, or you get them. Keep learning. I had an astrologer recently say to me quite proudly that she hadn't read an astrology book for 10, 15 years. And I thought, you're actually admitting to that? I was really shocked, because it either says you've closed your mind or you think you know everything. And we know with astrology that every new transit, every new ingress, Pluto moving into Aquarius soon, all of that is going to teach us something new about the planets and the signs. So jump on board. If you want to see clients, give it a go. Let people know what you're doing. Understand your niche. Understand what it is that you do well. Understand your life experience, what you can bring. But for heaven's sake, don't stop learning, because that's where it becomes problematic. Again, in my opinion.
Great input there, Frank. There's a couple questions about free will and sort of fate. So Mohammed says, can you fight with your North Node? Is it at free will? And then someone else asked a question that felt kind of similar about, fate versus free will.
Interesting. Yes. The idea that you need to fight with any part of your chart is a particular belief or a particular idea that may not be right. Doesn't have to be there. The idea that we have to move from our South Node to our North Node is another idea that I would question. It's the same with the IC and the MC. Why do we need to leave one area of the chart in order to grow? I question that. I think we need to, I say need, and we don't have to, but we can benefit from exploring every part of our chart. That's the first thing. So the idea that the North Node holds the key, when you end up neglecting your moon, which is actually a planet and our nearest neighbor, I'd look after my moon before I even began to think about my North Node personally. Fate and free will, it's really, it's a big subject, and maybe I'd like to talk more about the nodes in Frank Answers. So the next few I'll focus on the nodes, because I think that's important to look at. In terms of fate and free will, the chart is the fatalistic part. As soon as you're born, you have a chart that's going to be hit at different times through transit, progression, solar arc directions, which is my favorite. Whatever it is, it's now set in stone, that chart, because it's a birth moment. And it's a moment we share with many things being born at that time, whether it's an idea or a dog being born or a butterfly being born. But that moment of time is fixed. And as things travel, as planets ingress into new signs, new houses, by transit, progression, the rest of it, we have opportunities to grow and develop rather than stagnate. So the fatalistic part is really the fact that if you have 24 degrees Capricorn on your ascendant and you were born 60 years ago, you're fated this year to have a Pluto transit. That's the fate at this moment in time. The rest of it, I would say, is negotiable. We can't stop other people making mistakes, other people getting ill, other people drinking themselves to death, all the awful things that happen to our loved ones and the people around us. But through our transits and our chart, we can understand our journey in relation to those people. So it's complicated. It probably needs a bit more thought and work on how I would say it. But I think the fated part is the chart. The free will is what we do from the moment we're born all the way through to the grave, that whatever that time may be, we can negotiate with our territory, And sometimes you hear that, the map, the birth chart is like a map of territory, and we can't go beyond that. I don't believe that either. I think that map can expand. You can look at that chart, and it's not simply you will only experience in your life what that chart promises or the potential, because people go beyond that. They go far beyond that. And we know that there are people that have gone far beyond in metaphysics, in physics, far beyond what anybody else has ever considered. So there's always the potential to, I would say, we're bigger than our charts. And our charts show so much of who we are. But even then, there's still the ability to go beyond that.
Whew, powerful. Okay, one more from Jenny. So, and this is about the Saturn-Uranus square that we've been experiencing all year. So
Yeah.
I'm Aquarius rising and Taurus moon in North Node, feeling super stuck in the Uranus-Saturn square. Any words of wisdom for us folks? And I would love if you could frame this as definitely feedback for Jenny and people like her specifically, and also for all of us who are navigating the Saturn-Uranus square, because it's touching all of us.
It is. And if it's not touching us, it's touching people that we know.
Right.
It's touching the world. It's touching the news. It's, we're feeling that. You and I have spoken about that in previously, Amanda, with the whole, everything is very, very split. Everything's divided at the moment. And it does feel like it's Saturn versus Uranus.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the people that are doing Saturn might not think they're Saturn. They might think everybody else is Saturn, so our perspective of where we are on the Saturn-Uranus spectrum is interesting as well. But what I would say to Jenny and to anybody who's feeling stuck is to recognize that with Saturn, it says, cultivate the things that are important to you, grow, invest in them, commit to them. Those areas of your life that really feel like they're important to you. That's what Saturn asks us to do. Say, I'm serious about this area of my life. I'm going to pour energy into committing and developing that. Uranus, on the other hand, says, where can I break or shake up a part of my life? Now, it may be the same part of the life that needs a bit of shaking up. But the Uranus temptation, if we go to Uranus, is to blow everything up, to get rid of relationships, family, move to another country, quit our job. We don't have to be that extreme. So what I would say during these times is to pay attention to what's important and commit to it in a Saturn way, but find in your own way something Uranian that you can change. And it might be just starting off by saying, Thursdays or Thursday afternoons, I'm no longer doing X, Y, and Z. I'm now doing my astrology. Or I'm now going for a walk in the town, on the beach, having my own time. With Uranus, the key is we can, if we want, to make drastic change, and that's absolutely everybody's right. The key often with Uranus is to take something in the life that feels suffocating, that we're struggling with, that we feel very hemmed in, and instead of blowing it up, to instigate some sort of change that frees us up. And making a little change every week can be just as empowering as breaking free and leaving something completely. So the temptation with the Saturn-Uranus is the fear, Saturn, of change, Uranus. And what you don't have to do is do change all in one weekend. So what I would say to Jenny and to everybody else, if feeling stuck, address what is important, stick to that, address what is itchy, angry, what you feel intolerant about, and tackle that slowly in a way that feels like you can breathe again, that you've got a bit of freedom without necessarily putting all the things that you've created in jeopardy. But again, if you're somebody that needs to make a drastic change, don't wait either. I don't want to curb that important, but making little changes bit by bit addresses that Uranian challenge for change without putting yourself in danger or difficulty.
Whew. Wow. It's, I think what makes it so challenging is it seems like such conflicting energies that it just seems like, that desire to break free and create something very new. And, and for a lot of people, I know it feels like they need to escape what feels like this confinement.
Yes.
And then there's the, well, where is it less confining, and, all those things. But then there's this, so it's like, is the Saturn fear holding you back from making the change that you need to make? Or is the Uranus energy like kind of encouraging you to blow up something that doesn't need to be totally blown up? And I think that's what, each person needs to answer for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it can feel particularly challenging, because it feels so conflicting there.
And it's both planets are asking that. But we need to recognize the bits that we want to keep and the bits that need fundamental change, and perhaps not be fearful of Saturn, and also not be fearful of a domino effect. So if we make a change, and I've seen this, I had a client, I may have mentioned this before, I had a client recently who was ready to leave her husband, very stressed out. It wasn't really him. She loved him, but she was at her wit's end. And what she needed was space. Mm-hmm. And I, as I do when I'm seeing clients often or talking to students, I think I sit back and I sometimes say a little prayer for a little bit of insight, even if it's very simple. And I just ask the cosmos to give me an idea. And I say, do you have a spare room in your house? And she said, yes. I said, is it full of junk that you need to clear out? And she said, yes. Okay. So I said, how about taking that junk out over the next few weeks and moving into there with your office, where the door can be shut and you've got your own space? And she did that, and it made a world of a difference. Now, it's not going to stop massive problems in a relationship, perhaps, but it gave her the necessary space not to be blaming the husband for how she's feeling all the time. And it just made a huge difference to her way of coping with this stress of, I need space, I need freedom, I need change. And she got it, and she's thriving. She's in a very, very different state. So I felt that was extremely, that person, it was very helpful. Yeah.
I love how simple that is. And that part of it is you gave her the permission to take the space she needed. She might not have thought of that on her own, but how brilliant. Because maybe she just needs that alone time. She needs that like mental space to be able to create and be with herself. So that is brilliant. So what I'm hearing is us also giving ourselves the permission to quote unquote blow things up. I mean, for her, that might have felt like something, really big to actually even say to her husband that she wants. It might have taken some courage to say, hey, look, I need space. I want this room to myself. But giving ourselves permission to make those changes that could, like you said, have the domino effect that actually unravels the whole thing in a good way.
Yes. And in the last few weeks, I've been seeing clients who've been talking about, we've both been talking about how they can declutter. Mm-hmm. And getting rid of the physical, often in terms of clothes you don't need, having a garage sale, go online and people pick up stuff from your house. There's all sorts of ways of getting rid of stuff. And I've been talking about that a lot with different clients in the last few weeks. And the starting with the physical opens up. It's like a key, it's a door to opening up the other baggage that we carry emotionally, that we carry in every other way. And sometimes that, I've had clients who say, I don't even go into that part of the house because it just makes me feel bad, and I just sort of lock it off. And again, it's a great symbol of what they won't face about other aspects of their lives. So getting rid of the physical is often the beginning of some major psychological, emotional, personal transformations. So it's a great idea. Start off with what you can actually move physically, and the process itself is incredibly therapeutic too.
Whew, love that. Frank, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. If you have a question for Frank, we still are taking questions for Frank Answers. So you can submit your question at astrologyhub.com/Frank Answers. And then that's where you can go and submit a question for that show, which is weekly. And then if you want to put your name on the wait list for the Empowering Astrology Workshop that's coming up in September. And that's going to be, again, a series of 3 classes in September. Information.
October.
I'm so sorry. When are we? Yes, you're right. October. More information on that will be coming soon. You can go to astrologyhub.com/empowering astrology. That's astrologyhub.com/empowering astrology. And just put your name on the wait list. And as soon as we open up registration, you'll be the first to know. And then you can decide if you'd like to join us for that. Frank, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. I love getting to unpack like the wisdom in you. It's awesome to watch it just like blossom out of you. There's so much that you have to offer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for being here and for your there's such a beautiful earnestness in this community, this sincere desire, this really sincere curiosity to learn from all of you astrologers that have been doing this for many, many years and have lots of wisdom to share, but also this sincere curiosity about the universe, about our role in the universe, about why we're here, what are we doing, what's the point, and just being able to use astrology as that roadmap to get answers for things like that. So thanks to all of you for being here and for that sincere curiosity and earnest desire to know and learn and grow. It's really fun to share this space with you. And Frank, can't wait for our upcoming workshop.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'll see you there. I love astrology, and I'm sure you all get that already from me, and it's wonderful to share with you. And as I say, I never want to stop learning. So you will teach me as much as I am trying to teach you. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Okay, everybody, take care. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.